Greetings. Got a good one today. For those of you who don't know, I grew up watching the movies in the Godzilla franchise. So, like, the cheesy ones from like the 60s and the 70s and 80s and all that. But yeah, throughout my entire life, I've been a pretty big fan of the Godzilla franchise in all its iterations, including the old goofy ones, the 90s ones that had kind of a more serious tone, and the more recent MonsterVerse movies have been pretty good for the most part too. But today I'm going to take a look at what, in my opinion, isn't the best Godzilla movie. I would probably consider this the third best Godzilla movie, but it is my personal favorite. And that, of course, is Shin Godzilla. So, got the shirt repping. And the hat. But anyway, as usual, spoiler alert, because I'm going to be talking about the story and the plot lines and various scenes and all that stuff. This one, as I do with most of them, I highly recommend watching this movie yourself. It's good. There's some animosity with the fans or whatever. Some of the fans don't like it because it's so different drastically from any of the other Godzilla stuff that's come out beforehand, but to me that's part of the charm of it. So a little bit of a backstory first. This was actually, I think it was directed or produced or both by the same man who did the Neon Genesis Evangelion series. And you can pick up on that a little bit because the music they use, there are clips of tracks that were used in the anime as well, but it like totally fits. Before I even start, I'm going to say the music in this is phenomenal. Like, they use enough classic tracks from like Akira Ifukube, who did the majority of the original themes in the Godzilla series. Everything from like the military marches to like Godzilla's entrance and like all the creepy stuff. And they utilized a lot of tracks from that catalog, while also incorporating some songs from Evangelion, and a couple of like original tracks were made specifically for this song that, in my opinion, are amazing. There's one track called Persecution of the Masses that they play during Godzilla's initial attack in his final form, and it fits the mood of the scene so well, it's ridiculous. Anyway, I'll go into a little bit of the story. I'm going to just try to blow through it quickly because I know I say this every video, but I'm going to try to not go like over 20 minutes and make this ridiculously long. So, movie starts off. It's a regular day. There's an investigation by the Coast Guard. There's like a pleasure craft that seemingly has nobody in it. They find out later that this craft belonged to a doctor called Goromaki, who was studying marine life. We'll get into that a little later. Anyway, the water around the boat starts bubbling and moving and all that jazz, and they're trying to figure out, they hold a press conference or whatever in Japan with the Prime Minister and whatnot, and they're trying to figure out what it is. Is it like an underwater thermal event? Is it like an underwater volcano? They rule all that stuff out. One of the cabinet ministers, Yaguchi, mentions that there have been theories of it potentially being a living organism, including even like video clips of potential large figures that would be organic in nature underwater. Of course, he's dismissed right away. That's ridiculous. It's a vent probably or something. They rule out the volcano. They're still trying to figure it out. And like almost immediately after dismissing Yaguchi's theory of the animal, a giant tail raises out of the water and catches everyone off guard. And this is kind of a theme that repeats throughout the first part of the movie. So all of a sudden, oh shit, okay, there was some truth to what he was saying, I guess. We'll investigate this further. So they have a series of meetings. Just the bureaucracy showcased in the film is it's very telling of the political procedure, I guess, in Japan at the time. This was kind of like a political movie in that sense, showing how bureaucracy gets in the way of reacting quickly in an emergency. I think this was around the time of the the Fukushima nuclear thing. I can't quite remember exactly when that was. But yeah, I think it was sort of like a play on that. Like the original Godzilla in 1954 was sort of a telling of the horrors of nuclear war and like the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Godzilla was kind of the animalistic, encompassing entity that represented the horrors of those events. And so I think, or at least I've read a couple theories that or something from the director, I can't remember if it's official or not, but saying that this is based on the horrors of the Fukushima meltdown, explosion, whatever it was. Anyway, so Tail comes up and they're like, okay, this is definitely an organism. So they call in a bunch of biologists and whatnot, and they're all basically like, we don't know what it is. Because, like, how would you know what that is? It doesn't look like anything even close to something that we know about in biology. Anyway, the creature starts moving through Tokyo Bay towards, like, the river, the canal area. There's, like, a water walkway thing. I'm trying to think of what it would be like. Well, in Winnipeg, we have, like, the Forks Walkway. So, like, there's, like, stuff set up, buildings and structures along the river that you can walk in and get, like, I guess food or something. I don't know too much about Japan's infrastructure, but that's what it looked like anyway. So it's moving towards that, the little canal area. And so right away everyone's like, okay, well, this is not good. You can see boats and stuff being pushed, and it's causing like mini tsunami type effects, like water overflowing into the streets, people running. Yeah, it's like a serious disaster. Even just this thing moving down the canal or the river is causing pretty significant damage. Right away, they assess the situation. They call another bunch of meetings because, yeah, that's kind of the theme here at the first part. And it comes to their attention, like, is this thing going to come onto land? And they're assured, no. It's there's no way. It is way too big. It'll be crushed under its own weight if it does make landfall. There is absolutely no way. So even if it does come onto the land, it won't go very far and will probably die. So everyone's like, okay. They hold a press conference. None of this is confirmed, so Yaguchi is urging the Prime Minister, don't go out of your way and tell people that they're fine, you know, whatever. Of course, the Prime Minister, wanting to, you know, ensure everyone's safe, just goes off the hunch that it probably won't make landfall and announces that to the public, which is followed immediately by the creature making landfall. So, again, sort of the same thing that happened. Oh, it's not a living thing. There's the tail. Okay, shit, it's not going to make landfall. It makes landfall. Anyway, it's going through the city. I think this is going like 13 kilometers an hour, which, you know, they're like, that's pretty slow for a creature that size. But it's causing lots of destruction. It's like smashing through cars, and buildings on the side are getting damaged. It's going down one street, and it like props itself up on an apartment building, and promptly, obviously, it collapses under the creature's weight. And you can see like people in the apartment like dying and stuff. It's it's pretty intense, the scene. This first stage, well, I guess this is like the third stage of Godzilla, technically, because the tail was the second, and apparently there was a first stage that we don't see in the movie, but this is the third stage of its evolution, and it looks a little goofy, like, it has like weird like fish eyes, and it's adorable, I think. It's friggin' cute, despite the fact that like blood is oozing out of its gills and stuff. But anyway, it ends up propping itself up on two legs and continuing its rampage, and everyone's like, what? And you can see it's literally evolving and like mutating in front of everyone. You can see its skin shifting and like all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so they're like, okay, this thing like is a rapidly evolving creature. Like, it does its thing. They mobilize the military, like a helicopter squadron, to go intercept it, assuming that the area is evacuated, because I forgot to mention, they evacuated the region of the city near that waterway, so that in case anything, you know, avoiding tsunami damage, whatever. They confirm it's evacuated, so they send in the helicopters, and they're ready to go, and they see one person, like, with a kid on his back, like, trying to escape, and they're like, okay, we've got to call off the whole thing. We cannot have collateral damage. The current treaty that Japan has, or they had at the time, I don't know if it's still in effect, I assume it is kind of governed by the US based on something that was drawn up after World War II. So there is a lot of red tape for the JDSF, which is their military, the Japanese Self-Defense Force, to mobilize under any circumstances. And it's kind of a fragile entity. They said something along the lines of like civilian casualties could like completely destroy the JDSF, so they don't want that to happen. Anyway, so they call it off. Creature rampages a bit more, goes back to the sea. They say, okay, well, it's going back to the sea for some reason. They find radiation that is in the area from power plants and whatnot. They're assuming no reactors have done that. And one guy says right away, like, the Godzilla is using like nuclear fission or something to like power itself, and that's laughed off. And then all of a sudden, within seconds, again, it's confirmed that the entire path that Godzilla had slimed through and walked through had insanely large amounts of radiation in that area, confirming that yes, it in fact is radioactive and radiation powered. So that happens again. They have another series of like 1,000 meetings, of course. And they're trying to figure out where Godzilla is. Where did it go? It's hiding somewhere. It's, I guess, replenishing its energy or whatever it has to do. And they come to the conclusion that the gills on it act as kind of like a radiation vent to like give it temporary release, but it will retreat to the water to cool itself. Because like in actual nuclear power plants, they use water to cool down the rods, like the uranium, whatever rods. So okay, that makes sense. The creature resurfaces again later on, a couple days later I think it is, and this time it is huge, like more than double its size. It's just absolutely massive. It much more resembles what we know as Godzilla. It's still grotesque, like with, you know, the Shin Godzilla aesthetics on it. Like it's kind of horrifying. But yeah, it looks a lot more like the Godzilla we know. And it starts going through the city again, and it's heading towards Tokyo this time, and it's about 3 hours away. So they're basically like, okay, enough pissing around, we're mobilizing the JDSF. So they have like F-2 fighters on standby, tanks, artillery, attack helicopters, reconnaissance helicopters. I think Apaches are one of them that they're using. Like they're going all out. So they go to intercept this thing. And they finally get to it. They give the go-ahead. They're like, is anyone in the area? They say, yes, it's evacuation. Someone pipes up, what about casualties? The Prime Minister's had enough. He's like, listen, this thing's got to be stopped. If there's collateral damage, that's unfortunate, but we have to destroy this thing as soon as we can. So right away, the first wave of lighter reconnaissance helicopters approach, and they've got little miniguns. I think they're Cobras. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what... Well, no, Cobras are really old. But it's like the modern equivalent of a Cobra helicopter, if you know what that is. So they have like a minigun on the front, and they all fire at him, and there's like a dozen of them or so, and all the bullets just bouncing right off them like it's nothing. It's like, okay, move in the Apaches and do the 50 cal. So they use the 50 cal. All those are bouncing off. So they request to the Prime Minister, can we use rockets? There could potentially be collateral damage. He's like, I authorize everything, just kill it. I'm over it at this point. Which, to be fair, yeah, okay. So they fire rockets at it, and they all like directly hit Godzilla in the face. Pretty much unfazed. Just cloud of smoke walks through, his face is fine, there's no visible damage. So they say, okay, let's switch to the tanks. We're gonna up the firepower. So tanks start firing from a little bit in the distance. These shells do serious damage, right? Not so much to Godzilla. They aim at his legs, I guess, hoping to take it down or whatnot. It does manage to slow him slightly, but not enough to actually injure him. So like, okay, let's up it one more time. Now let's use artillery. So as the tanks are continuously firing on his legs, the artillery is continuously firing at its head. Again, minimal damage. They're okay. Let's go all out. So they send in the F-2 fighters, they drop bombs on it, and there are a couple direct hits, and everyone gets a little excited temporarily until it continues walking out of the smoke. the only effect that it had is basically it changed Godzilla's direction. So I guess it wants to avoid the constant nuisance of bombs being dropped on it, tanks shooting at it, whatever. It'd be like, you walk into an area full of black flies and you want to get the hell out of there right away. So anyway, yeah, so that happens. He ends up like smashing a bridge or whatever, and this chunk of bridge goes flying. Ends up flying towards like where some of the tanks are. A bunch of them move out. It ends up landing on like 3 of them and completely destroying them. 2 of them are damaged beyond functionality at that point, and it also destroys the forward command post. I guess that was commanding the artillery and the tanks or whatever. So that's great. So they retreat and they try to regroup themselves, and the U.S. is saying, okay, we're gonna help, we're gonna come in, and we're gonna take him out for you, because yeah, again, that treaty basically dictates that in failure to, like, the U.S. is sort of responsible for Japan's safety in that sense. So I don't really need this candle. I'm gonna blow it out. It's kind of distracting. Anyway, so the U.S. wants to get involved now, so they're preparing everything. I think there's a carrier that moves out and starts heading towards Japan, and they're sending some B-2 stealth bombers. Great. Minimal time to evacuate. At this point, it's becoming darker. It's like the sun had set, and you've got like that blue hour or whatever it is in the sky, where there's still some light, but everything's relatively dark and in a blue hue. Which, side note, unrelated, one of my favorite times of the day. I love that. Just dark blue sky. Awesome. Anyway, neither here or there. So this is when they start dropping the bombs. The B-2s fly in, drop the bombs, hits Godzilla completely unexpecting it, because they're way up high. Like, he doesn't hear that shit or anything. And they actually draw blood when they hit him in the back. Evidently that pissed off Godzilla quite a bit, and that's when he first charges up his spines, and you see his beam come out, and he hits one of the stealth bombers as it flies over him. And they're like, okay, well, let's mix this up a bit. Let's circle around and hit him from the back so he can't get us. So the 2 remaining stealth bombers that weren't destroyed circle around, drop some bombs again. That's when Godzilla releases his back beams, which, yeah, like completely new power for him. He's never been able to do that. But anyway, all these beams, like at different angles, go flying out of his back and start hitting the bombs before they hit him. Take out the other 2 stealth bombers. They're down. And then I don't remember if it's before or after the scene where he blows up Tokyo. But anyway, so his attack on Tokyo is really cool. It starts off with him lowering his head a little bit and opening his mouth, and his like lower jaw separates a little bit, kind of like a snake does, when it's swallowing something. And all this radioactive air goes flying out of his mouth, and you can see it like going through the streets. It's like kind of grayish and whatnot. And then you see little silver eyelids close over his eyes, and fire comes out. And it starts igniting this radioactive air that's in the streets, setting the entire district of the city on fire. And the fire slowly compresses, and concentrates into a thin purple beam that's like slicing through everything. Slicing through buildings like a knife through butter. At this point, they're evacuating. The Prime Minister, after some protesting, finally agrees to evacuate. He's like, I got a duty, I have to make sure that this... And they're like, no, we need you to like lead the country. You can't be in a freaking active war zone. Anyway, just as his helicopter's taking off, one of the stray beams ends up hitting the chopper, killing the Prime Minister. So, shit, okay. So that happens. Then after the entire district's on fire, Godzilla slowly starts to shut down. The beam retracts back into fire, back into like radioactive air, and then into nothing, and he kind of goes into like a stasis state. Shit. I guess this is going to be a long one too. Yeah, he shuts down. And they're like, okay, so we got to figure something out. And they discover some notes from Goromaki, the guy who disappeared, who had that boat at the very beginning of the thing. And it's he was studying this creature. He had theories that there was a large organism underwater, and he was trying to study it. I guess maybe like when it was in its first form or something, maybe it got him. I don't know. And he has this contingency plan based on his studies of it being radioactive for a potential way to stop it if it ever got out of control via, I think they said that it was like an extremophile that makes it radioactive, not so much Godzilla itself, and they're like kind of symbiotic or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, so they come up with a plan. Okay, well, let's make this like coagulant that can decrease the nuclear energy in the creature and whatnot. And at the same time, the UN and US have basically decided, okay, we've exhausted our military capabilities. We're authorizing a nuclear strike on Japan, which, again, if you know Japan's history, letting a third nuclear bomb fall on the country is not an option for anyone involved. In particular, the new prime minister or Yaguchi or anyone, they're not into that. There is a representative from the US that comes to sort of deal with Japan and sort of be the interim, the link between the two countries. And her name is Kyoko, I think? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And she basically tells Yaguchi about this situation. He's not thrilled about it. She says, okay, we have to figure this out. The problem is that the information left by Goromaki, the doctor, is confusing as hell. Like, no one knows what to make out of it. It's on this big sheet, but like lines intersecting everything. Finally, they start thinking, okay, well, maybe it's supposed to be 3D. You know what I mean? Like, he just printed it out, I guess, I don't know why, but anyway, they end up figuring it out. Through use of origami, they realize that, yeah, this is meant to be 3D. They're like fucking around trying to fold it to see what happens. And they end up making a 3D model of what is needed, I guess, the knowledge they require to find out what exactly is the weakness or whatever it is. Blah, 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 blah. 3D model. They're like, okay, let's do this. Let's incorporate it into the coagulant. We don't have enough resources to make this in the amount of time that we need to make it. Their allies in Germany are like, we'll help you make this stuff. Don't worry about it. We got you back. And they're like, okay. So everything seems to be going okay. The US has basically given Japan 2 weeks to evacuate before they drop Tokyo 2 weeks before they drop the bomb on it. And they're rushing, and it's approaching the deadline. They're like, we have 2 days until the bomb is essentially approved, but we need 3 days to finish the process of creating everything they need. I guess the coagulant, the tankers they need to supply it, the cranes that they're going to use to administrate it, etc., etc., etc. Thankfully, PM reaches out to France. France kind of puts a motion to give Japan the chance to test out this plan. And if it doesn't work, then they'll continue with the strike. Thankfully for Japan, that notion is passed. So there's a scene later where like the Japanese political staff are extremely humbled and like bowing very deeply towards the French ambassador. It's a cool scene. So they get to work. So basically the plan begins. Godzilla is recharging his energy as he's standing there in stasis mode, so they need to deplete this energy so that they can safely administer everything. So the plan of attack is they wake him up essentially by sending unmanned trains with bombs on them into his legs to snap him out of his stasis, which he does. And then with use of US drones, they start launching missiles at him to try to get him to fire his beams and deplete his energy. Drones, obviously, because they're unmanned, no one has to die necessarily, so that plan works. Godzilla starts firing off his beams, taking out the drones one by one, taking out the missiles, not really taking any damage, but it seems to be working because eventually his beam depletes back into like fire and then fizzles out quickly. So that's when they send a swarm of train bombs, like we're talking like a dozen or something, all on the tracks, hit them, knock them sort of off balance, and then they have controlled detonations of buildings all around him, so the buildings fall on him, and he's almost down, and so a U.S. ship, I guess, that's out there starts taking out other buildings around him strategically with cruise missiles, so like 6 buildings topple on him. That's enough to bring anything down. Like, he's huge, but these buildings are skyscrapers, so they knock him down. He seems to be out. His last bit of energy depleted, and he's not moving, so okay, he's probably safe to approach. They send in the tankers and the cranes, and they start administrating the dose of this coagulant. I think they get about 20% into him from that first batch before Godzilla wakes up again. Good times. And he uses his beam in a short burst, I guess, because whatever energy he masked only had enough for that. Takes out all the tankers and everything. Okay, no, I'm wrong. Sorry, the train bombs initially knocked Godzilla down, and then after this scene when he wakes up, that's when they take out the buildings to take him down again, and then administrate the remaining coagulant through teams 2 and 3 of tankers and whatever. And they do that. And they get past the 75 mark, which is the guesstimated minimum amount that's required to take effect. But they actually end up administrating all 100% of the coagulant. Godzilla does wake up again, sensing something's not very good. Apparently someone says his skin's starting to stiffen, but he bites down on the cranes, gets up, and is about to cause havoc, and his entire body freezes over. Like, you can see, like, crack, 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 like ice or something. So he's officially, it's worked. No need for the bomb, which is fantastic. He will eventually wake up, but this will give Japan a lot of time to figure out what they're gonna do. And it'll reduce the radiation levels and everything that they need to do. It is alluded to that he will eventually wake up again, but this is huge. They can like do research. They can actually approach him without being burned with radiation, etc. Everything's looking good. So there's a nice moment with Kyoko and Yuguchi on the roof looking out at Godzilla, and she's kind of like, you know, you can't quit. There's been talk in this whole thing of him not really having faith in it, even though all his peers are like, you got to run for prime minister like one day. And he's like, maybe in 10 years. Anyway, so Kyoko says something to him like, you know, we made a good team or something along those lines, and when I'm president, I really hope that you're my Japanese counterpart. And he's like, yeah, more like puppet, eh? And they should laugh it off or whatever. She's like, okay, whatever. Anyway, he looks out to Godzilla, and he's like, okay, now we do the rebuild. We'll have a general election to dissolve the parliament and get everything proper again once cleanup and everything is done. They have an acting prime minister right now, which is fine, so they'll still be able to run, but yeah, they'll do that. And then they zoom into Godzilla slowly, and they show him frozen there. He's like all charcoal gray or black with like no motion whatsoever. Then they zoom into his back a little bit, looking up his tail. And then they zoom into the tip of his tail. And turns out they froze him in the nick of time because he was in the process of evolving into having smaller versions break off of his tail that were like really creepy looking, like something right out of a horror movie. They're like humanoid Godzilla-y looking, skeletal, demonoid looking things that were breaking out of his tail, and then the credits go. So basically, yeah, they avoided a huge catastrophe in that sense. Because it was alluded to, based on the evolutions, whatever, scientists are saying, like, anything could happen. Like, maybe pieces of him could break off and form, like, smaller units, and maybe he could evolve wings, and, like, it's his evolution potential was so spontaneous and quick that literally they could have been anything. And turns out, yeah, there it is. Little humanoid Godzilla with demon creatures in his tail about to pop off. But anyway, he's frozen. That's the movie. I love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. Right now, I'm not giving it a 10, but I'm giving it high marks. I'm giving it a 9.8 because I think the way this movie was done is phenomenal. Again, it's nothing like the original Godzilla movies at all. A completely different origin story. Like, none of the other movies existed in this canon. But just the way it was done was excellent. Godzilla was creepy as hell. the commentary on like basically the bureaucratic process in Japan was done excellent. The characters were really good. Everything was just solid. There was even some comedy here and there, just with like the constant disproving of the things that they think they have right. You know, oh, it's not going to come on land. Boom, it's on land. Oh, it's not an organism. Boom, there's a tail. Like all that was great. There's even one joke where shortly after the PM is killed, the acting prime minister takes over and he has a little debriefing and whatnot, and then he's going down to finish his lunch, and he looks down and he's like, oh, my noodles gone soggy. Noodles have gone soggy. Oh fuck, I can't speak English. Yeah, and then he's like, I knew this job would be difficult. Like, that's the biggest concern he had. Obviously not, but it was good. It was a nice little chuckle in an otherwise serious movie. Again, the score was absolutely amazing. The music was fantastic. Excellent mix of classic songs, some stuff from Evangelion, bleh. And the new tracks were amazing. Again, Persecution of the Masses in that scene where he like demolishes Tokyo or wherever it is for the first time is just, it fits the scene so perfectly. The choice of using purple instead of the standard blue color was really visually spectacular. It really made it seem otherworldly and like a completely unknown thing. I don't know, just the choice of color was good. The design of Godzilla, I think, was fantastic. Some fans hate it, but I think it's great. For what it is, for the kind of movie it is, it was perfect for that. I can't praise this movie enough. Like I said, in my opinion, it's my favorite movie. I do acknowledge that the original and Godzilla Minus One are technically better movies as a whole, but this one I watch more than those. So that's my unsung praise. This is already my longest ever video, but it's a subject that I'm extremely passionate about, being a Godzilla fan since like age 6. So I feel it is somewhat justified. Anyway, 9.8. Absolutely watch it if you haven't already. I give it my highest recommendation, but go in there not expecting a typical Godzilla movie. I would say that this is like one of the closest since the original to being considered almost a horror movie. Not quite, but like almost. As close as a kaiju movie can get to a horror movie. Because there are some genuinely really creepy scenes in it, in particular that reveal at the tail there. So anyway, that's it. Way over time, but that's Shin Godzilla 9.8. Definitely check it out, guys. Definitely check it out.